Welcome to The Beginner's Guide to all things economic, political, and sociocultural. Here we will be sharing quick bites into all the topics, concepts, and theories that we all talk about but should probably know a little bit more about. I'll be doing my best to keep it all unbiased, to the point, and hopefully interesting enough to inspire you to dig a little deeper on your own. With that being said, I'm your host, Emmy Davis, and this is The Beginner's Guide to Command Economies. I'm just going to come right out and say this off the bat. Distinguishing between an economic system, a political system, and a political philosophy can be tough, especially when most of our modern examples are muddied up versions of all of them. In the last episode, I mentioned that I like to think of current-day economies as a spectrum, with free on one end and command on the other. Since we went over free market economies, I figured that it was only right to follow up with some discussion on command economies. As capitalism is to the free market, so is communism to the command. A command economy is a component of the communist political system. Economics, politics, and the philosophies behind both are seemingly always intricately intertwined. For the sake of this discussion, I will be sticking closer to the economics of it all, rather than the politics that surrounds it. Alright, so what is a command economy? A command economy is one where the market is controlled by the central government, and not supply and demand. The government dictates the levels of production and has control over the distribution and prices. A command economy may also be referred to as a planned or centralized economy. Each name emphasizes a different aspect of the same economic system. Calling it a planned economy emphasizes the government's role in the big picture aspects of the economy. Officials set all the national economic priorities. This often means that they choose how and when to generate economic growth, how to allocate resources, and how to distribute the output of the entire economy. This often takes the form of a multi-year plan. Calling it a centralized economy emphasizes the role of the government's central planners within what would otherwise be the private sector. Private ownership of land and capital is non-existent or severely limited. This allows the central planners to set prices, control production levels, and limit or forbid competition within the private sector. In a pure command economy, there is no private sector whatsoever, as the central government owns or controls all of the business. For example, if you ran a manufacturing facility, you would have no control over what it is you have to produce, how much you produce, and what you charge for the whole ordeal. Monopolies within industries are common in command economies. In fact, they are often seen as a vital piece needed to reach their economic goals. People often point to unions being commonplace, noting that they can be classified as a non-government-owned entity. Unfortunately, countries that ascribe to this economic structure tend to require active political party membership in order to participate in the unions. Remember that command economies are closely tied to communism. This means that political party membership almost always means communist political party membership. Supporters of the command economy system often point to the allowance of ease it gives to the government to respond to economic issues. With complete control, they are able to create and dismantle jobs at will or as needed. They're able to respond quicker to unforeseen circumstances. And, most popularly, supporters say that command economies give the government the ability to prioritize social welfare over private profit. The flip side of the coin, however, is that the government has complete control and can do harm just as easily as they could do good. And let's be honest, even with the best intentions, they often are unable to respond correctly since they feel the pressure to respond quickly, regardless of having gathered the right data to effectively balance the economy. There is still some debate around the first known command economies in history. Some scholars point to the example within the Hellenistic world and shortly thereafter, arguing that those economies could be categorized as a command economy of sorts. The societal and political structures of the time did not lend themselves to ever being that integrated throughout the whole of the country or empire. At least, nowhere near enough to confidently categorize it as a command economy. Luckily, there is far more consensus that the first command economy meeting our definition can be found in Vladimir Lenin's communist USSR, which, surprise, means that Karl Marx will finally enter the discussion. Karl Marx released the Communist Manifesto in 1848, largely inspired by his work, and in the spirit of the French Revolution, Lenin led the Great October Socialist Revolution in 1917. Also known as the Bolshevik Revolution. Lenin's political ideology at the time was neither a fully formed philosophy nor a built-out political theory. What we now call Leninism is made up of some politico-economic aspects of traditional Marxism paired with Lenin's own interpretation of how Marxism should be applied. Once in power, Lenin nationalized industry and established a government monopoly on all foreign trade. The influences of the USSR spread the economic model throughout Eastern Europe. The inefficiencies of the economic policy and the corruption it facilitated are largely agreed upon to have contributed to the fall of that communist regime. Beyond the USSR, command economies have shown to be far less viable than initially imagined, and have led almost every attempt to face major economic hardships. Despite this, some of the main tenets of command economies still hold significant influence among a number of economies around the world today. Perhaps the next well-known example is China. Following the official formation of the People's Republic of China in 1949, the Chinese Communist Party maintained a command economy until 1978. With the end of their Maoist period and the West making moves to bring them into the global economic market, China was slowly transitioning into a mixed economy. Their transition away from a command economy to a mixed economy has made them consistently one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing economies for over 40 years. Besides them, there still are a number of command economies out there today. While North Korea and Cuba are probably the most recognizable, Venezuela is a great case to evaluate in regard to how command economies are functioning in today's world.
He wanted to enshrine his country as the home of 21st century socialism. And in almost 15 years of power, Hugo Chavez was succeeded in profoundly changing Venezuela. He first came to power in an election in 1999. That's 7 years after he tried to seize power by force. And he immediately left his mark by establishing the Bolivarian Revolution and changing the constitution. The aim to build a new democracy with the working classes at the heart of it.
Venezuela's economy is all about oil. They were one of the original 5 large oil-producing countries that created OPEC, and throughout the 60s and 70s enjoyed a stable command economy with copious amounts of government spending. Following the crash in oil prices in the 80s, a major banking crisis in the 90s, coups, and general strikes, the country fell into a deep recession within the first few years of the 2000s.
Years of skyrocketing prices and vanishing wages, the economic collapse in Venezuela may have finally hit rock bottom.
But what does that mean for the working class there, who have been really just struggling for years now to make ends meet?
By 2018, the annualized inflation rate had reached 900,000% and was doubling every 28 days. With no loosening of government control, Venezuela's economic policies have led them to being ranked 176 out of 177 for the most repressive countries to live in. They have created both the worst economic depression and migrant crisis that Latin America has ever seen. At this exact moment, March 25th, 2022, $1 is worth 433,632 Bolivar. I really apologize because each pronunciation of that was wildly incorrect, but I'm going to move on. Or, one of those things that I cannot pronounce is worth 0.0000230610 of a US dollar. Looking around the world today, you can see that command economies are struggling. And looking back at history, you can see that command economies have led to less than stellar results. Despite these facts, we can still see that command economies and the policies that lead to them are still being introduced and implemented. It's easy to see why those in government would be okay with this. But why is it that we see societies, at least in the beginning, being okay with this as well? That question leads us to an entirely different conversation. One that we'll have to get to another time. This has been the Beginner's Guide to Command Economies, and I'm your host, Emmy Davis. This podcast is a subject entertainment production for Free Markets Destroy, a project of the Washington Policy Center. Free Markets Destroy celebrates the power of free markets to tackle humanity's most daunting challenges. The world isn't perfect, but it's getting better every day thanks to entrepreneurs who work tirelessly to deliver life-changing innovations. Washington Policy Center is a nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy research organization that publishes studies, sponsors events, and educates citizens on vital public policy issues. For more information on either, check out freemarketsdestroy.com or washingtonpolicy.org. As always, thanks for listening, and do your own research.